Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a special Crosstalk segment of Reel to Reel. It's November, and we're just getting ready to vote this coming week. And as you know, as citizens in a democracy, this is our major way of controlling our government and having our voice heard in the politics of our country.
But hopefully our voices are not just limited to one day during the year. We have the right as citizens to make our opinions known throughout the year. And we'll be talking to two gentlemen who are very aware of that. They're concerned with the Catholic opinions in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, and they work to ensure that those opinions are represented in the halls of state government.
Our special guests this evening are Mr. Howard Federoff. He's the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Catholic Conference. And joining Mr. Federoff is Mr. William Boland, who's the representative of the New Jersey Catholic Conference. Gentlemen, welcome to our show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here with us. And let's start off with the basics. What actually does a lobbyist do?
Well, a lobbyist represents an organization, as we represent the Catholic Church, with public officials, members of the executive branch of government and the legislative branch of government. Also with the media, too, so that the public understands what we're trying to accomplish in our contacts with the public officials.
Okay, let's talk about the functions of the Catholic state conferences.
Well, the conference is organized basically by the bishops of a given state to provide a means by which they can speak out on public policy issues. I like to say that wherever government touches an institution of the church, the conference will be there at some time or another. Also, the conference provides a means by which the bishops can speak out on burning moral issues of the day, such as death and dying issues, which are so prevalent these days.
Okay. Now, basically, you're dealing with the Catholic population. So how do you get their opinions across? How do you represent the Catholic population?
Well, as Bill said, we really represent the official church. We represent the bishops and the dioceses. And we are conveying to public officials and to the media the opinions and the outlook of the bishops on the various public issues that come before state government. Hopefully, then, with the Catholic people behind their bishops, we are representing also the people.
The two of you have the very nice titles of being executive directors for your respective state Catholic conferences. You're also called lobbyists, and sometimes the word lobbyist is a dirty word. What exactly does a lobbyist do, and how are you different from other lobbyists?
Well, we differ from other lobbyists in a few respects. One is that we're not permitted to take sides in an election. We're not permitted to contribute to political campaigns. Our church organizations cannot have political action committees to raise money for candidates. Except for that, though, we're pretty much the same as other lobbyists. Most lobbyists I've found in Harrisburg, and there are about 300 of them, are fine people and are trying to help the legislature with special knowledge in their own fields. So when it comes to us, it's our job to let the legislature and the executive branch of government know what the church thinks about the issues before them, if those issues are important to the church to speak on.
Bill, exactly who would you be dealing with as a lobbyist?
Well, in the legislative realm, you deal with the senators and assemblymen from your state, the governor and his staff, and of course the staff people, the respective, both the partisan political staff as well as the professional legislative service type staff people. There's another interesting aspect of our work, and that is that we do a lot of our relationships with the executive, with the Department of Education, with the Department of Labor, the Department of Community Affairs. So there you're dealing with the commissioner and with department heads, because much of the government regulation comes not through statutes, but rather through administrative regulations, and those are administered by the executive department. So you have that variety of people that you deal with.
Throughout the country, do we have representatives like yourselves through all the states, or is this something just here in our area?
In every state where you have more than one diocese, you generally have a Catholic conference, and there are approximately 33 or 34 Catholic conferences in the United States today.
And are you people in contact with each other? Is there a coordinated effort in what you do?
Yes, we meet twice a year, and that gives us a chance to share ideas, and we meet with members of the staff of the United States Catholic Conference, and then we have a sharing in that respect too. We also relate on an ad hoc basis when a certain novel issue comes up legislatively or administratively. We may put out an SOS to our brothers and sisters in other states and say, what do you have on this? Can you help us out? Have you been successful with it? What are the pitfalls, the obstacles, and what have you?
Howard, you're an employee of the Catholic Church, pretty much.
Yes.
Do you take your directives from the bishops? Do they tell you what issues to go for? Or are you going to the bishops saying these are issues that are important?
Well, I think it works both ways, Father. The bishops, of course, are the governing board of our conference, and they have the final say on the policies determined. But they have to depend upon their appointees in different areas who are sent to Harrisburg to work with us. Our major areas institutionally are education, health care, and social services. And then we also get into a range of other more general moral issues that impact on the whole population. And the way our conference works, as a result of ongoing regular meetings throughout the year, all these specialists in these various areas look over the legislation and other acts of government that have an impact on the church and make recommendations to the bishops through what we call an administrative board of policymakers appointed by the bishops. So that's the ongoing action of our conference, to develop positions. Once the bishops and their appointees agree upon the position that we should follow, then it's the staff's job to represent those positions in the state government.
You're talking to people in state government, you're talking to the bishops. Do you in any way approach the people themselves, the Catholic population themselves, to teach them or to update them on legislative issues?
Very definitely, Father. That's what we generally term our grassroots network. And it's especially important for lobbyists such as us who cannot support particular candidates and cannot make political contributions to have the support of our people behind us. And through the grassroots network, we try to educate them through shows similar to yours, through the diocesan newspapers, through columns, through press releases in there, through attending meetings, so that these people, that the Catholic people, can get a grasp of the issue, and then from that knowledge be moved to take some action with respect to that legislation.
Are you putting anything in print at this time?
I have not. My column is set to run within the next month.
Okay.
Well, the Pennsylvania Catholic Conference for quite a few years now has had a public information office, a journalist working with us who communicates in a variety of written media and contacts with the electronic media. So we have a newsletter, for example, that goes out 6 times a year to about 7,000 or 8,000 leading Catholics in the state, and that's another way we communicate.
Well, we're going to take a break right now, but stay with us. We're going to be talking about some of the important issues these men are dealing with.
At the Donahue Funeral Home, we're always gratified to hear from the families we serve. Over the years, many bereaved families have told us how much they appreciated the warm, home-like atmosphere of the Donahue Funeral Home. To make such moments perhaps a little less difficult, the Donahue Funeral Home suggests that you discuss with us now, in the privacy of your home, pre-arrangement and the financial advantages and peace of mind it brings. That's what living is all about.
Welcome back. We're with Mr. Howard Federoff, the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Catholic Conference. And we're also with Mr. Bill Bolin, who's the Executive Director of the New Jersey Catholic Conference. Gentlemen, lobbyists are of all shapes and sizes, and they support a variety of different causes. Do you, as Catholic lobbyists, support strictly moral issues?
Well, a lot of the issues we are involved in are moral issues, obviously. But we also are involved in, as I said earlier, institutional issues. For example, the whatever government aid to church-related schools, which is allowed by the United States Supreme Court, we are interested in upholding in the Pennsylvania state government, and we've been successful at that for many years. As a matter of fact, right now in Pennsylvania, there's about $50 million worth of legitimate court-approved state programs to help non-public school children and their parents. But then, beyond our institutional interests, we do get involved in a variety of moral issues, social justice, pro-life, and so on.
Mr. Baldwin, are the issues that are being dealt with over in New Jersey pretty much the same as Pennsylvania?
Yes, Father. I think that across the country, except for some regional concerns such as farmland problems, which you see more in the Midwest, that generally not only the issues are the same, but issues tend to be cyclical as well.
Mm-hmm. Do you, as lobbyists, and in conjunction with the other lobbyists across the country, the Catholic lobbyists, do you set agendas, particular issues that you want to push and other issues that you set on the back burner for the time being?
We're in the process of doing that right now in New Jersey. We haven't had a specific publicized legislative agenda before this, but we are working in the beginning of the coming year, we will publish a legislative agenda which we will widely disseminate not only among public officials but among Catholics who are interested in these issues, which will say very clearly what the Catholic bishops of New Jersey are interested in accomplishing in the public policy arena for the coming year. And this is a good way to publicize your program and also to focus your efforts.
Could you give us a hint as to what issues we can expect to see at the top of that agenda?
One of the big concerns we have is the issues surrounding these death and dying matters. We are particularly concerned right now with the surrogate parent situation. We have a particularly sad case in New Jersey, which is popularly known as the Baby M case, where a surrogate mother who had a contract with a couple to bear a child bore this child and wants to keep the custody. The couple has gone to court to enforce the contract and obtain custody of the child. We're taking the moral position that we hold that this is against public policy, that it's immoral, that it violates the integrity of the marital relationship as we understand it.
Mr. Fedorov, how about in Pennsylvania? What issue would be at the top of the agenda?
Well, in Pennsylvania, in this current session, which is going to end at the end of November, we were interested in getting some control over the content of cable TV because of the pornography and obscenity which is starting to get into the cable TV delivery in certain areas. A bill to do that passed the Senate and is in the House. Whether we'll have time to get it out of the House in this session is a question, but that'll be at the top of our agenda for the next session if we don't get it done this session. Another bill that we're very interested in along the lines Bill was mentioning on death and dying is a bill that would give legal status to written medical directives on the part of patients to their physicians should they become terminally ill and unable to express themselves later. That legislation has been controversial around the country for many years. In this session of the legislature, our bishops decided, rather than just oppose it across the board, to participate in its drafting so that we can build into it some pro-life safeguards to make sure, for example, that the written directive can only ask for the termination of ethically optional care. And also, this bill has a strong and clear definition of euthanasia and a prohibition of it, and a requirement that patients be nourished and not be allowed to die for lack of food and water.
Mr. Fedorov, you've been involved, excuse me, in the Catholic Conference since 1969.
Yes.
So what are some of your successes in the past?
Well, we have had, as I mentioned earlier, a long string of successes with the help of many good legislators in the area of aid to children in non-public schools. 3 or 4 programs there, auxiliary services, textbooks, school bus rides, and that's been a big help to keeping our children in Catholic schools. Mm-hmm. Then in the pro-life area, we've had many successes. For example, in Pennsylvania, we have no funding for abortion now as a result of the lobbying of our conference and other pro-life groups. In the area of social services, maybe a little less newsworthy issues, but issues like protecting confidentiality in adoption cases, we've succeeded in passing in the past few years. Anti-pornography legislation now in other fields besides cable TV. And I think that's a good sample for you for now, but there are many that we get involved in over a period of 18 years.
How about a report from New Jersey?
We have had a similar success with the educational programs in New Jersey. We have school busing for our children. We have textbooks, and we have the compensatory ed services, which have really made a very big difference for many children who really have difficulties with reading and mathematics, and this has brought them up to speed, and this has been really a tremendous help to the parents in being able to send their kids to these schools. That, I really think, has been the most dramatic success that we've had.
Okay. We've discussed what's gone on in the past and what's happening now. Briefly, can you predict the future for us in New Jersey?
Well, I said before, I think these issues tend to be cyclical. We are grappling with the living will issue, too. In New Jersey, the legislature has opted for a commission approach first, where they're bringing together interdisciplinary membership. We have, representing our interest, a Catholic theologian from the seminary, the major seminary of the Archdiocese of Newark. We have a Catholic lawyer and former legislator, and a prominent physician. And we are hopeful that through this process that we will be able to come up with something which will address the problem, firstly, and secondly, that will have the appropriate pro-life safeguards, which we will insist upon.
Okay, Mr. Fedoroff, briefly for Pennsylvania.
Well, I think that we'll have to continue being on guard against the spread of euthanasia in our country. If you read the polls, there's growing sentiment in many quarters for active euthanasia, and we have to do everything we can to counter that with our actions in the legislature and appearance in court and so on. Also, we'll always be committed to trying to change the Supreme Court's policies on abortion in order to restore protection for the lives of unborn children, which is now non-existent. In addition to that, as I said, we'll continue to try to clean up the content of literature and TV shows, because there is, in the opinion of many people, direct impact on morals when it comes to the saturation that we have of pornography in our country. All these things seem to be related, and we try to work on all of them.
Okay, thank you very much. Please stay with us, because when we come back, we're going to be talking about the separation of church and state. Don't go away.
A few weeks ago, we at Reel to Reel began an appeal for your financial support. Many of you responded generously, and we wholeheartedly thank you. Because of that, we're able to continue to bring you our show every week. However, we still need and appreciate your continued support. As you know, for the past 5 seasons, we've been able to bring you this weekly show, requesting only your cards and letters in return. If you're a new viewer, or if you've enjoyed the message of Reel to Reel over these past years, we'd like to thank you for watching and invite you to participate in this venture by actively supporting the show. Today, with costs rising all around us, we need your financial support. A donation of $5, $10, $20, or whatever you can send would help ensure the continued presence of this program. Send your contributions to Reel, 222 North 17th Street, room 907, Philadelphia, PA 19103, and thank you for your help.
The House of Charity can be found at work throughout South Jersey, wherever there is suffering and distress. Through its agencies, compassionate care goes to the elderly. The needy receive food and clothing. Special education programs administered to the mentally handicapped. Expectant mothers receive pre- and postnatal care, and medical services are rendered to the ill. Support the House of Charity in South Jersey. Touch someone's life with love.
We'd like to hear your comments or suggestions. You can write to us here at
Reel to Reel, 222 North 17th Street, room 907, Philadelphia, PA 19103.
or call us during business hours at 215-668-9842. Welcome back. Separation of church and state. Well, we're talking with Catholic lobbyists today, and we're trying to decide whether that's going to be a problem. And I'll start off with you, Mr. Fedoroff. Is it? Is there a conflict there?
I don't think there's a real conflict. I think it's a perceived conflict on the part of people who would like to see public policy made without any reference to religious or moral values. There's no violation of separation of church and state. The church is a separate institution from the state, and all we're doing is communicating our views along with all other institutions and segments of society. So I would say in a sense that the cries about separation of church and state is kind of a red herring on the part of people who just don't want to see us involved.
Mr. Boland, do you run into that attitude quite a bit?
I haven't seen that problem very often, no. One of the problems we have more of a problem with the courts on separation of church and state, and we suffered from a very illogical Supreme Court decision a year ago in a case which was called Aguilar versus Felton, where the Supreme Court said that we could no longer have public school teachers coming into a Catholic school building to give compensatory ed services, namely reading and mathematic remedial instruction, to our students in a classroom which was completely devoid of religious ornamentation. And that was a program that had been in existence over 20 years and is generally recognized to have been extremely successful in helping underprivileged children in the poverty pockets of this nation. And in the judgment of many, it is a very illogic decision, and it is really twisting the notion that our founding fathers had of separation of church and state.
Now, you're both in agreement on that. I see both of you nodding. Is there a lot of communication or a lot of cooperation between the state conferences in issues such as that?
Well, there is, both on phones, at meetings, and correspondence. I was agreeing in particular with Bill's reference to the courts, though. That's where the question of church and state has been exaggerated to an absurd extent. We don't have nearly as much trouble with the executive branch and legislative branch of government on that question, but the courts have gone to absurd extremes.
So speaking of communication, obviously there is quite a bit of communication between the state conferences. How about if you're your local parishioner and you want to get some information or you want to communicate to the state conferences? Can that be done? Can they utilize you in a very unique way?
Well, they can and they do, but not as many people know about the Catholic conferences as we wish, although we have very good coverage in the diocesan papers around the state. And we're in the Catholic directories around the state, too, so people who really want to find out about us can get in touch with us. And we're always anxious to give them whatever help and information they need.
We're surely not the only democracy. Through Europe, we've seen a real different attitude towards the role of the church in politics and the kind of benefits they receive. Have you been successful at all in trying to incorporate the developments in Europe with the way that church and state interact to try and bring that into this country to some extent?
Well, I would say not enough yet. We had a discussion about that with the Council of Churches, and it was brought up by one of their people that over in Holland, the Dutch have a lot more acceptance of the state helping the church and so on. Our education man said he wishes we had a Dutchman on the Supreme Court now, but that's one area where European countries have not had the inhibitions we've had. We haven't been able to translate that over here to my satisfaction as yet.
Mr. Boland, are the other churches represented in the same way that the Catholic Church is represented?
Yes, Father. The Council of Churches has a structure quite similar to the Catholic Conference, and the Orthodox Jewry does as well. And they testify at the same type hearings that we do, and they are arguing for moral and ethical principles with legislation, and also dealing with the institutional legislation that affects their specific institutions.
Do you find yourself in cooperation with these groups, or are you more at loggerheads with them in issues?
No, I think generally we cooperate and cooperate quite well. We have in the past even entered into more formal coalitions, for example, in the opposition to the death penalty, to capital punishment in New Jersey. The Catholic bishops and the Protestant clergy and the Jewish clergy entered into a very active coalition, and while they were not successful, they certainly were successful in pointing out the moral problems with the capital punishment.
Gentlemen, you mentioned the fact that you can't be a channel of funds to particular political candidates or for particular political issues. How do you get your funding?
Well, our funding is just a matter of the support that each bishop in the state has agreed to give through diocesan contributions to our budget. And as Bill said earlier, it's a matter of a per capita contribution, so that the dioceses with the greatest number of people pay the most part of our budget and so on.
So I'm funded exactly the same way.
So basically a small portion of what the average parishioner puts into the collection basket on Sunday becomes your funding and your support for your programs?
Yes, when we're out public speaking to Catholic audiences, I sometimes mention that. They know that we get all of this school aid, and so one way to translate that into understanding for them is that perhaps 15 cents out of every year's contributions to the church that a parishioner would give would come to the Pennsylvania Catholic Conference. So that's not a bad buy.
In terms of the people that we're dealing with, our own Catholic people, in what ways would you encourage them to utilize the services you offer?
Well, I think one of the things is if they're interested enough to keep reading up on public issues in the diocesan papers, they would learn a lot about what we're doing, and then they could also help in what we're doing, because the lobby is only as effective as his constituency or as the legislator perceives the constituency that he represents. So I think that's very important for Catholic people to keep informed on the issues that are active, and then keep in touch with what the bishops think about them.
Mr. Bowen, with the election just a couple days away, do you have any specific advice for members of the Catholics of New Jersey in this election?
Well, I would recommend that they take a goodly amount of time to inform themselves on exactly where the candidates stand on the issues. We have predominantly congressional races in our state this year, and I think the education is so important that they ought to know where these people stand and then go out and vote accordingly.
Mr. Fedorov?
Well, specifically in Pennsylvania, right here in the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, just before each major election, the Standard & Times will be publishing the views of the major candidates and legislative candidates on a wide range of issues of interest to the Church. And if that issue is read carefully by Catholic people, they should understand then where the candidates stand and vote according to their consciences.
It sounds like, once again, that both of you and throughout the country, the Catholics are supporting issues, not necessarily particular candidates. Well,
that's correct, and as the Church, we're not permitted to endorse candidates, but we are certainly permitted to help people understand the issues, and that's a big responsibility that we have.
Well, gentlemen, we're grateful for both of you taking the time to be with us today. And next week we're going to be back with another regular issue of Real to Real. So we thank you for joining us tonight. We urge you all to get out and vote, and have a good week, confident that Jesus is Lord.
Travel arrangements for Reel to Reel by Atkinson and Mullen Travel of Media, PA. Phone area 215-565-7070.